So the point is, I believe that you don't have to automatically increase property taxes every year. I'm convinced that you can not only lay out a long-term financial plan that is fiscally responsible, but one that holds the line on property taxes. If the union threatens to strike, they need to understand that if they do strike, then you move for even more radical changes, like those articulated, like in effect you need to break up the central office anyway, and you need to decentralize the budgeting process so the money is actually following the kids to those neighborhood schools.
What's your base, Paul?
My base are people who believe that the crime is out of control and that we need to have a safe city, and the city won't survive unless we get a handle on violent crime. My base is for people who believe that parents should have the right to choose the school that's best for them and not have financial impediments to do that. And communities should be able to have the power to change their local school if it's failing. And finally, my base is people who believe in financial responsibility and in fiscal integrity, and know that if we continue on this current path, I mean, the post-election property tax increases alone are going to decimate what remains of the middle class in the city. And not only empowering parents by telling parents, you decide what school is best for you, whether it's a public school or a charter school, or you want to go to parochial or private school, we're going to support you, we're going to provide you with tuition support. But you're also telling the community, we're going to empower you to have a role in determining the destiny of your individual school. It's about parental empowerment, and it's about community empowerment. Because right now, if you have if you live in a poor community and you don't have the income, chances are you're stuck going to that failing school, and then the community has no ability to transform that failing school, because that failing school is part of this citywide collective bargaining agreement, and because the central office is too terrified of the union to go in and to make fundamental changes in that school to make that school better.
Last thing we'll say, and then you can tell us how you're fixing all this. Look at slide 15.
In 30 seconds?
Yeah, and I'll give you a minute or two. Slide 15. Look at those pension benefits. I mean, well, I got to put my glasses on for that one. I mean, the firefighters' final average salary when they're retiring at age 61, $123,000. Pension's going to start at that year at $97,000 and go up from there. Look at the teachers, $93,000 average salary, $74,000 pension. Look at the police, $108,000 final average salary. This is when people, they're finishing their career and now they're going into the pension years. They're going to start with a pension of $81,000. So would you support, say, the Illinois legislature putting on the ballot an amendment that would allow the city and the state to cut pension benefits?
All right.
CPS, slide 7. You know, that slide kind of tells it all. It's fourth grade performance by Hispanics, by blacks, and whites at CPS. What's that performance like, and what would you do differently if you were mayor at CPS?
Well, it's abysmal. Let me just give you a statistic.
Why is it abysmal? Just give us a flavor.
Well, 1 in 4 students in the Chicago public schools are meeting state standards, and
this is fourth grade, but the same as 11th grade.
Yeah, it's the same at 11th grade, and 1 in 4 students at the high school level are meeting college entrance standards on the SAT. So it's roughly the same. Incidentally, when you look at
those apply to blacks, it's maybe even worse if you do it blacks.
When you look at black students
versus whites.
When you look at black students, it's 15%.
Okay.
These are the results you get in a district where they're spending the equivalent to $28,000 per student. These are the results.
28,000.
28,000. And when you take...
Did you say 28?
28,000.
Okay.
And when you take pensions and long-term debt out and capital, it's $22,000. This is what you get. And let me point out that Chicago spends $2,000 more per pupil on the average than the state average. And Illinois spends between 24 to 50% more per pupil than the surrounding states.
And Indiana or
Indiana,
Florida,
and Illinois and the surrounding states, particularly Indiana, are all outperforming Illinois, despite the fact that they're spending much less.
Take a quick look. Take a quick look at slide 9. It analyzes succinctly the contract that the mayor negotiated in 2019, taking us to 2024. Average salaries going to almost $100,000 a year. Average, average second-year salaries going from 53,000 to 72, 35% increase. So why are we doing that? Would you have negotiated that kind of contract?
Well, if you remember when that contract was being negotiated, I actually did a series of editorials criticizing the contract and also basically telling the mayor when the union struck, that she should stand tall. This was an opportunity to really dig into, you
told her to stand tall, be tough.
Absolutely.
What did she do?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, what I would have done is I would have never negotiated this type of a contract in the first place. And let me point out that a year later, when the teachers union threatened to strike illegally, I might add, to keep schools closed, the second year, I would have used that opportunity as an opportunity to abrogate that contract, end that contract, and actually go push to provide for school choice, which would basically have been to take a portion of the school district's budget and to use that money to provide tuition support for parents who elected to enroll their kids in parochial or private schools, because I think parents should have that opportunity. Let me point out that...
let me just
Sure.
ask you to add on, because you're a big supporter of school choice.
I am.
What would that take if you were mayor? Give us the vision of school choice under Paul Vallas.
Sure. Well, I believe that the money should follow the kids. And incidentally, that means the money should follow the kids when it comes to the parents picking a school for their child, whether it's parochial or private school or charter school. But the money should also follow the kids when it comes to the money that the school district is spending itself, because only about well over 40% of the money that the school district budgets actually finds its way into instruction. So much of the money is skimmed off the top, and that's not just in Chicago. That's characteristic of all public schools systems, even in the suburbs. So so much of the money is actually not finding its way into the classroom. Look, I would do three things with the schools. The first thing you need to do is you need to break up this behemoth system, this centrally managed system, which has been an unmitigated disaster. And if there was ever a greater example of that, it was the way they responded to COVID and the way they did the remote instruction, which was an unmitigated disaster. I mean, what are they missing? 40,000 computers and laptops? So at the end of the day, the district needs to be broken up, and you really need to create...
Broken up, how many students do we have roughly there in one centralized system now?
We've lost students for 18 years. We lost 25,000 students the last 2 years alone.
So
I think we're at 330.
330. So you'd break up that 330 into much smaller units with...
Well, what I would do is I would break up the district into much smaller districts, but more importantly, I would really create, like we did in New Orleans, create a district of schools where really individual schools have broad autonomy, and the central office or the central administration has responsibility for things like facilities and accountability, rather than just because in New Orleans, for example, net of school construction dollars, because the district provides for the facility needs of all the schools, about 97% of the money actually finds its way into the local school, which means the overwhelming vast majority of the money is finding its way into the classroom. And let me tell you what that money is being spent on. The money is being spent on things like a longer school day, like a longer school year. I mean, when they negotiated this collective bargaining agreement with the city and gave the teachers union the richest contract in history, $1.5 billion, the richest teachers contract per capita of any city, and the richest union contract in Chicago history, they didn't add another minute to the school day, and they didn't add another day to the school year. We have a school calendar that must be based on the Farmer's Almanac, 176 instructional
You want
days.
all those changes that you've been outlining for a few minutes to occur. Sounds like you want competition by a variety of schools.
You want competition.
But, the teachers unions are kind of opposed to almost all of those things. Would that be right?
Yeah, so
Well, what do you do, Paul? If you're the mayor, How do you deal with the teachers unions?
Well, first of all, if the mayor wanted to set up a school choice program, and as you know, the legislature passed a bill that creates a elected school board, but the next mayor is going to have a 2-year window before that elected school board begins to take effect. So what the mayor could easily do is the mayor could have the schools create their own tuition subsidy program.
Really?
They could do it.
The mayor could, you as Paul Vallas, could give people school choice?
You could do that, absolutely.
Really?
You could do it via school choice. You could do something as simple as take the annual TIF surplus, tax increment financing surplus that last year totaled $160 million that's gone to the schools. And you could basically say, look, we're going to give you this windfall, but you're going to have to take an equal amount of money and use it to provide tuition support for poor families that send their kids to program and private schools. So the point is, number one, you could do that. You could create a school choice system right now unilaterally. And trust me, if the money, because people say, oh, you're taking money from public schools. No, the money is supposed to follow the kids. You have fewer kids, you have less expenditures. You know, the money follows the kids. So at the end of the day, you could easily do that, and you're not going to financially destabilize the system.
But again, I come back just to, I don't want to be a thorn in your
No,
side.
be a thorn.
Let's take, slide 11. Look at the map of the United States. 13 states, only 13 states give teachers the right to strike. Illinois is one of those. Are the teachers going to strike over some provision that some change you want to make? And how are you going to handle that if they do go on strike?
Well, you know, look, first of all, you can create a school choice system without the teachers striking. There's nothing preventing you from opening charter schools. They have a side agreement, for example.
There's a cap on charter schools.
Well,
isn't there now,
it's
right?
a side agreement cap, but there's nothing that legally mandates that you cap charters. And the district contracts out with private school providers now, school providers who provide for special need kids. I mean, the alternative school providers. So the idea of
So you could do these things.
So the bottom line is you could do those things. You know, if the union threatens to strike, they need to understand that if they do strike, then you move for even more radical changes, like those articulated, like in effect breaking, well, you need to break up the central office anyway, and you need to decentralize the budgeting process so the money is actually following the kids to those neighborhood schools. But the second thing that I would do is I would work with these locally elected school councils and empower those councils to select better school models for their local neighborhood schools. In Indianapolis, if your schools are failing, the district will invite other school operators to come in that the community signs off on and the community supports that will, in effect, replace their failing school model with a superior school model. They're called innovation schools and Renaissance schools. Okay. So what you're doing is you're not only empowering parents by telling parents, you decide what school is best for you, whether it's a public school or a charter school, or you want to go to pro-or private school. We're going to support you. We're going to provide you with tuition support. But you're also telling the community, we're going to empower you to have a role in determining the destiny of your individual school. It's about parental empowerment and it's about community empowerment. Because right now, if you have if you live in a poor community and you don't have the income, chances are you're stuck going to that failing school. And then the community has no ability to transform that failing school because that failing school is part of this citywide collective bargaining agreement, and because the central office is too terrified of the union to go in and to make fundamental changes in that school to make that school better.
Does those communities that you just referred to as being empowered, those parents that you just referred to as being empowered, you didn't refer to, but you could have, the taxpayers who might like some of these things, the competition, the efficiencies. Yes. Paul, is that your base? Because I've heard critics say, Paul's a great guy, and we like a lot what we hear. I've heard them say that.
My mother, right?
Well, no, I've heard citizens say that, but they wonder, what is your base? Because they say in Chicago, you know, the people have a base of blacks, a base of Hispanics, a base of gays, on and on. Various ethnicities, various this and that. And they say, what's Paul's base? Greeks? I don't know how many Greeks we got, you know?
Not the Greeks.
Greek sound?
Well, look, you know,
what's your base, Paul?
My base are people who believe that the crime is out of control and that we need to have a safe city. And the city won't survive unless we get a handle on violent crime. My base is for people who believe that parents should have the right to choose the school that's best for them and not have financial impediments to do that. And communities should be able to have the power to change their local school if it's failing. And finally, my base is people who believe in financial responsibility and in fiscal integrity, and know that if we continue on this current path, I mean, the post-election property tax increases alone are going to decimate what remains of the middle class in the city.
And if you want property taxes not to increase, and maybe if you want them to actually decrease, you have to cut education. Is education 60% of your property tax?
Well, I think what
K through 12 education?
Well, let me respond by saying what people miss when they talk about city finances is the fact that the city budget is not a $16 billion budget. The mayor controls $26 billion in annual spending.
That counts CPS, is
that's
that right?
CPS, that's city colleges.
Which is another 8 billion, 9 billion?
That's 10 billion when you
10 billion
when
now
you include the
for CPS.
special property tax pension levy.
Okay.
So it's the schools, it's the city, it's the airports, it's the CHA, it's the CTA.
But a lot of
Park
that,
district,
excuse me, a lot of that is K through 12 education. A lot of people's property tax. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no. When it comes to property taxes alone, it's about 60%.
Well, that's a big deal since people
right, but the point
want to know what you're going to do about property taxes.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that when you have $26 billion that you spend annually every year, the ability to go in and to reprogram those revenues, to reprioritize, if you have a working knowledge of budgets and how to leverage spending and how to prioritize spending, there's no reason why you can't prepare more responsible budgets than are currently being prepared, and there's no reason why you have to have these automatic annual property tax increases that are actually built into the city's budget. What people don't realize is that the mayor and the schools in combination over the last 2 years increased property taxes $426 million, and they're automatic. Do you know in the city council, the annual property tax increases are inflation driven and they're automatic? Imagine what they're going to be like next year with inflation as high as
7
it
or
is.
8%.
And it's the same thing with the schools. The city council has no control over the city's property tax levy, and the schools routinely go to their levy cap. So the point is, I believe that you don't have to automatically increase property taxes every year. I'm convinced that you can not only lay out a long-term financial plan that is fiscally responsible, but one that holds the line on property taxes. And I want to say something that I say that from experience because I've managed 17 multi-billion-dollar budgets. I operated the city and froze property taxes in all my years and left the city with huge cash reserves. I balanced the school district's budget for 6 consecutive years.
This is who you are.
That's right. This is
not
what
just
I do.
Chicago. You were the Chicago superintendent for 6 years.
Right.
But you were the Philly superintendent for a number of years.
6 budget years.
Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Right.
Recovery district after Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
And fixing that with a lot of choice programs. So what is that? Almost 2 decades in education.
It's almost 2 decades, and when you include my years,
you got Haiti,
and when you include my years as city revenue director and later budget director, I've.
They don't want to hear your resume. They want to hear what you've been saying. How do you fix things?
The point, right?
Have you told them that? Because the last thing we got to go to, and then we got to go, is to pensions. Because before you get to these other things exploding, look at slide 13. The state of Illinois has a $530 billion hole, but Chicago and Cook County account for almost a quarter of that, $122 billion. And when you look at slide 14, the average household in Chicago is on the lam for about $110,000 per household. And you can look at all these things in that slide. Chicago and Cook County counts for 25,000 of that. But people who live in Chicago also live in Illinois.
Right.
So they got to cover all of those things, $110K. That's a lot of dough. I mean, and last thing we'll say, and then you can tell us how you're fixing all this. Look at slide 15.
In 30 seconds?
Yeah, and I'll give you a minute or two.
I'll
Slide
give you a minute,
15.
though.
Look at those pension benefits. I mean, well, I got to put my glasses on for that one. I mean, the firefighters, final average salary when they're retiring at age 61, 123,000. Pension's going to start at that year at 97,000 and go up from there. Look at the teachers, 93,000 average salary, 74,000 pension. Look at the police, 108,000 final average salary. This is when people, they're finishing their career and now they're going into the pension years. They're going to start with a pension of 81,000. So would you support, say, the Illinois legislature putting on the ballot an amendment that would allow the city and the state to cut pension benefits?
Well, first of all, you're not going to pass a constitutional amendment to change that will impact pensions. Not with this current legislature.
You're not.
You're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to get on the
So
ballot.
how do you deal with those three slides?
Well, look, there's three problems. You talked about the benefit side, but there's two other missing things that you failed to comment on. One was the years that they simply didn't make pension contributions. In fact, if you remember, they froze the pension. They had a pension holiday for a number of years, not only at the state level, but at the local level. So there were years in which you did not make contributions, okay?
You think this problem would have gone away if they did that?
Let me explain.
Okay, go ahead,
Let
sorry.
me answer the question.
Sorry.
So the bottom line is you have a contribution issue that you missed the boat on. And then second, you have an earnings issue. You know, when you have like hundreds of different pension systems, so many political decisions are made about contributions. If we had gotten the returns that some of the high-performing pension states had gotten, or states had gotten, who have consolidated pension investments, who have independent, non-political boards making decisions regarding, and you know, everybody's bragging about the returns on pension investments the last 3 or 4 years. I can point out states that had double the number of returns. So at the end of the day, it's just not all benefits. It's also contributions, number one, and number two, it's also investment returns. So you've got to address those two issues too. And during the campaign, I talked about how you could address those two issues. So for example, if you recall, when Rahm Emanuel proposed his pension obligation bond during the campaign, I talked about, I criticized that because I felt dedicating existing flexible city revenue to finance that pension obligation bond, which would have raised money and put that money into the pension system to make up for the contribution shortfall. I said, don't divert existing city revenue to finance that bond. Why don't you issue bonds to amortize the interest? And when the revenues that will be available from retiring tax increment financing districts, expiring tax increment financing districts are freed up, you could use that to finance the bond. And then you could put billions into the system to make up for the lost investment. And then that in the process would enable you to improve the health of the systems without raising property taxes. And the second thing that I suggested on the income generating side was to consolidate the investments, all the pension investments for the city investments, and then have a single board of some of the top. I mean, imagine if you had Mr. Griffin, invest your money for you, the return that you would be able to receive. But, you've seen the scandals about the pension investments and about politically connected individuals, getting pension funds to invest and then squandering those investments. You remember the stories that you've seen over the years. But if you consolidated the investments under a single board, and so that you only had the best the top individuals making those investments, and you realize a better return, it would in effect significantly improve the health of the systems, and then allow you to perhaps reach some sort of grand compromise on the spending end of the equation.
Okay, so we got to get out, but
Okay.
I think you've laid out a path.
Yeah.
That should you decide to run, should you make that decision around the end of Memorial Day, people might think you got a few solutions to crime, to education, to pensions, other fiscal issues. They might think that. And the last question they'd ask you is, well, you mentioned Ken Griffin, and I mean, his net worth is about 25 billion with a B, billion. He and his friends could be of help to you, because if you're going to run this campaign, as you know, having run a few before, you're going to have to really ratchet up the funding. Willie Wilson, who entered the race just yesterday, I think people say he might put in $5 million of his own money or more. I don't know. Do you have $5 million you want to put in? So really the issue is, can you get people to fund this? How much do you need? How much? Because we've talked about, you've said you've outlined your base. Now all you need, Paul, and then I guess you can make the decision, is some confidence that the funders will be there so you can get out your message.
Yeah, I'm confident that the funders are going to be there. Clearly, I'll be seeking funding from, people.
Ken Griffin?
People who are affluent, and I welcome funding from about anybody. But I've also really over the last 3 years through my postings on LinkedIn and Facebook and things like that, and my commentary, I've connected with a lot of people who have been, for the last couple of years has been saying, are you going to run? We want to support you and things like that. So I'm going to, if I elect to run, I'm going to look forward to the opportunities to raise money, not only among individuals, who traditionally make contributions and have the ability to make those contributions, but I anticipate that I'll be able to get support on a very, very broad scale.
So come back soon, folks.
I will.
And you come back next week and every week to Public Affairs.
Public Affairs very much thanks Residco, our sole corporate underwriter, for helping to make the production of this show possible.